Tonight, we enter a room of baked clay and low firelight, in a city raised beside the slow brown rivers of ancient Sumer. The date is distant, more than 4,000 years from your own bed, yet the question waiting here feels strangely near. What happens in the first moments when breath has stopped, when a familiar face becomes still, and when those gathered nearby begin whispering the terrible word that no household wishes to speak? Among the clay tablets recovered from the ruined cities of southern Mesopotamia are poems of descent, mourning, burial, and the dark country beneath the earth. Scholars at the University of Oxford assembled many of these broken writings into the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, allowing modern eyes to read fragments once pressed into wet clay by ancient hands. The tablets do not measure 7 minutes after death. They offer no ancient clock counting the soul's departure, yet they preserve something quieter, and perhaps more unsettling, the belief that death begins with a surrender. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, as the lamps grow dim, tell us where you're listening from, and what local time surrounds you now. You find yourself standing on a flat roof above the city of where night air carries the scent of mud brick, warm reeds, and cooking smoke. Below you, courtyards withdraw into darkness, one after another, like small wells of shadow. Somewhere, a donkey shifts behind a wall. Somewhere else, water tips from a jar with a careful household splash. The river plain lies beyond the city, silent and silver beneath a moon that seems almost too large for the sky. Inside one house, someone is dying. There is no palace ceremony here, no golden procession, no splendid grave awaiting discovery by archaeologists. There is a woven mat. There is an oil lamp. There is a clay cup left untouched beside a headrest. Around the body sit people who know the shape of this person's hands, the sound of the cough, the ordinary habits that suddenly appear precious. They watch for the next breath. Their waiting becomes a kind of prayer, although no one calls it that. Then the chest no longer rises. Nothing bright escapes through the roof. No visible spirit steps onto the floor. There is only stillness, and the faint spit of the lamp wick. Yet, for the people of this ancient city, that stillness does not mean that the matter is finished. A person is not simply erased when breath ends. Something remains connected to name, burial, water, bread, and the careful attention of the living. The surviving texts are not instruction manuals for dying. They are poems, laments, ritual echoes, royal stories, and myths copied by scribes whose own hands have long become dust. Their words arrive damaged. Their edges are missing. Sometimes half a line survives where a complete thought once stood. This is why every confident claim about exactly what the Sumerians believed must be handled gently. The tablets are windows, but their glass is cracked. Still, certain images return. There is a world below the ground, dim and unavoidable. There are gates. There are officials. There is a queen whose authority reaches into the silence where mortals cannot argue. There are the dead, reduced from the noise of life into a shadowed condition, dependent upon what is remembered and what is given. Even gods entering that realm do not stroll through it casually. They descend under rules. Your mind drifts toward one of the most famous of these writings, the story of the goddess Inanna descending into the world below. Oxford scholars have reconstructed its Sumerian verses from many surviving tablet pieces, copied in different places and at different times. In the poem, she leaves the brilliance of the upper world and approaches the realm of death with every sign of power upon her body. Her ornaments gleam. Her clothing announces rank. Her confidence seems complete. That is the strange detail worth holding quietly tonight. She does not enter empty. A modern storyteller might call those ornaments protections. A psychologist might call them parts of identity. A priest in an ancient courtyard might simply have understood them as the visible signs of office and divine privilege. Scholars still debate how much the poem reflects funeral belief, how much belongs to religious drama, and how much was shaped by scribal imagination. The poem speaks clearly in images, but it does not explain itself politely for modern listeners. Ancient texts rarely do. You look again toward the room where the body rests. The family has not read a modern translation, nor considered theories from Oxford libraries. Their fear is simpler and heavier. Was the person properly prepared? Will the name continue to be spoken? Will water be poured? Will the unseen dead remain peaceful, or return troubled and thirsty? Archaeology gives weight to that concern. Excavations at Ur, preserved and studied through the Penn Museum, uncovered ordinary burials as well as astonishing royal graves filled with vessels, jewelry, instruments, and attendants. Most people did not descend with royal splendor. Most entered the earth with modest objects, placed by hands that could afford little, yet still wished to provide something. A cup beside the dead can say more about love than a throne ever could. And then there is the curious corner of belief, the detail that seems almost too human to be ancient. Mesopotamian families worried that an improperly buried or neglected dead person might become restless, not a theatrical monster prowling through moonlight, but a presence made miserable by abandonment. The dead could hunger. The dead could thirst. The dead might trouble dreams because they had been denied the ordinary courtesies of remembrance. It is a melancholy thought. Eternity begins with family maintenance. Your lamp flickers. Beyond the wall, the city continues its patient business, unaware that one household has changed forever. A baker wakes early to prepare grain. A guard rubs dust from his eyes. A child turns in sleep. Above them all, the stars remain painfully calm. This is where the idea of 7 minutes enters, not as a translated claim carved into a tablet, but as a question you carry into the ancient silence. Suppose there were a few brief moments in which a dying consciousness releases the world it knows. Suppose memory loosens like a knot in wet cord. Suppose the journey described by the Sumerians is not a timetable, but an image for that final surrender. Would the first moment be confusion? Would the second be recognition? Would there be a moment when the soul reaches backward, searching for the voice of someone beloved? Or would the choice be quieter than that, less like a judgment in a court, and more like the simple impossibility of carrying everything with you? You notice the cup beside the still body. It remains exactly where it was placed, catching a small circle of orange light, a practical vessel, a loving gesture, a silent admission that those left behind do not know what the dead require, but cannot bear to send them onward empty-handed. The earliest Sumerian writings do not offer paradise as a reward for good behavior in the familiar later sense. They suggest a darker equality. King and laborer, beautiful and forgotten, all approach the same lower horizon. Rank may decorate the entrance. It may influence memory among the living. Yet the land beneath the earth waits with a patience that defeats every title. For a moment, it feels as though the whole city understands this. Every brick wall is temporary. Every necklace will one day lie without a throat beneath it. Every voice, even the voice of a king, depends eventually upon someone else remembering its name. And in that hush, the hidden mystery takes its first shape. The tablets do not tell you that every soul receives 7 measured minutes. They tell you something older. Death is approached as a passage in which possession, position, and certainty grow thin. Whatever waits in the darkness cannot be met by holding more tightly to the bright world above. Perhaps that is why the ancient words still trouble the modern night. They do not shout. They do not promise. They simply place a gate in the darkness and leave you listening for the first soft sound of it opening. The lamp burns lower beside the motionless figure, and the room acquires a different temperature. It is not truly colder, perhaps, yet every person seated there feels the change. The body upon the mat no longer shares the warmth of conversation, worry, or expectation. An old woman reaches forward and touches the cheek with 2 fingers. Her hand remains there briefly, as though tenderness might persuade the skin to answer. No answer comes. You stand quietly near the plastered wall, breathing the odors of sesame oil, wool, clay, and river dampness. Outside, sandals scuff along an alley, and someone closes a wooden shutter. The city remains alive with its small necessities. Inside this room, necessity has taken another form. Those gathered must begin caring for someone who can no longer thank them. In Sumerian thought, human beings belong intimately to clay. Their stories imagine people shaped from earth, made serviceable by divine intention, animated for labor and ritual duty. The idea carries an unsettling simplicity. Your hands touch mud every day. Your house rises from mud brick. Your storage jars harden from mud in a kiln. The fields themselves depend upon rich river soil. Then, at the end, your own body seems to reveal its oldest kinship. Clay does not object to silence. A daughter takes a cloth and dips it into cool water. She wipes dust from the forehead, then from the closed eyelids, with strokes slow enough to seem ceremonial. Perhaps no written rule requires this exact motion. Perhaps grief invents its own rituals wherever people live together. Yet washing the dead is an act found across ancient societies, because love has always resisted the indignity of neglect. The person may no longer speak, but the family still sees a father, a sister, a companion, not an abandoned object. You can almost hear their thoughts avoiding the obvious. He was speaking yesterday. She laughed during the meal. His sandals still wait by the doorway. Her spindle remains tucked inside its basket. Such ordinary things suddenly become accusations. They insist that a life existed, solid and busy. Only moments from this unbearable stillness, one man lifts the empty cup and sets it near the wall. Another rolls a reed mat more tightly. There is no frantic running, only subdued movement. Each task performed with the caution of people handling a mystery. In a modern room, machines might sound, screens might dim, professionals might arrive in crisp clothing. Here, there is the family, the neighbors, and the enormous quiet responsibility of touching death directly. The people of southern Mesopotamia knew this responsibility well. University of Pennsylvania excavations at the ancient city of Ur revealed burials connected with residential life, reminding modern observers that death did not always travel far from the household. Some dead remained physically close to places of cooking, sleeping, repairing tools, and raising children. The earth beneath familiar rooms could contain those once loved above them. That closeness changes the feeling of a house. The floor is not merely packed clay beneath bare feet. It is memory made solid. Children may play where grandparents rest. Meals may be shared above ancestors who once prepared the same grains and poured the same water. Death isn't hidden at the distant edge of town. It settles into family space, quiet as a foundation. A young boy at the doorway does not fully understand. He notices that adults speak more softly than usual. He watches his mother's shoulders tremble while her face remains firm. Perhaps he wonders why no one wakes the sleeping person. Perhaps someone has told him not to touch the cloth laid near the mat. Children have always been given partial explanations, careful words placed over difficult truth. The body is straightened, arms are arranged gently. The mouth, once quick with complaints and jokes, remains closed. A garment is brought forward, plain but clean, holding the faint scent of stored wool and dried herbs. Dressing a dead relative offers a final protection against disorder. It says that this person is still worthy of attention, still recognizable, still surrounded by human care. Yet beneath the cloth, change has started. You do not need harsh detail to sense it. Every living body is a temporary agreement between warmth, breath, water, and time. Once breath departs, that agreement loosens. The skin grows cool. The familiar face becomes strangely distant. It looks like the same person, then suddenly does not. Grief partly begins in this confusion, when the eyes continue recognizing someone whom the world has already altered. Some Mesopotamian incantations and later traditions speak of the dead as capable of remaining uncomfortably near the living, especially when burial duties failed or sorrow disturbed proper order. It is a curious, almost domestic fear. The departed are not frightening because they are wholly alien. They are frightening because they are still attached. They might remember thirst, hunger, insult, or loneliness. They might linger like an unanswered request. There is gentle sarcasm in the human arrangement, is there not? You spend a lifetime escaping household chores, only to risk becoming a concern for relatives who forget the proper offerings. Even eternity appears to involve family obligations. Still, humor fades quickly in this room. The question troubling scholars is not whether ancient Sumerians cared for their dead. Graves and texts make that plain. The harder question is how literally ordinary people imagined the continuing self. Did they believe a recognizable personality remained attached to the buried body? Did ritual supply comfort mainly to survivors, or did watered food and respectful burial seem genuinely necessary to whatever part of a person endured? The clay tablets answer in glimpses, never with the neat certainty a modern mind would prefer. Near the mat, the old woman begins a quiet lament. Her voice has no performance in it. It rises and falls like wind rubbing against reed fencing. She lists simple losses: the absent voice, the unused seat, the hands that will not return to work. Such mourning does not require grand theology. It comes from the wound left in daily life, where one missing person alters the weight of every ordinary object. You notice the dead person's hand. It has the roughness of labor, thickened where rope, tool handles, or baskets pressed against skin. This hand helped shape the world of the household. It repaired a wall after rain. It lifted grain. It held a feverish child. Now it lies open, holding nothing. That is the first surrender. Not jewels, not status, not secrets whispered to priests. Simply the surrender of touch. A living person grasps, carries, points, comforts, refuses, and draws others close. A dead hand releases all such command. Even its final stillness seems to state a difficult truth. Nothing in the visible room can be kept through strength alone. The family wraps the body carefully. Cloth passes across shoulders and feet, gathering the outline into a quieter shape. Someone sets aside a small vessel. Someone places a personal object nearby, not lavish, perhaps a bead or simple tool. The gesture is intimate rather than grand. No one knows precisely what the dead can use. Still, sending a loved one without a sign of care feels almost cruel. The scent of wax smoke thickens as the wick curls inward. Dawn is still distant, but darkness no longer seems empty. It has gained a presence, a still form resting among the living, a body returning gradually toward the material from which houses, vessels, and human stories are made. You remain there in the room, close enough to hear water drip from the washing cloth into a bowl. Breath continues in every chest except one. Each soft inhalation sounds newly precious, newly temporary. The family does not need a scribe to explain what has happened. They understand it through their hands. A person of warmth has become a person of clay, and the clay is being treated with love. The doorway opens into the alley while the city is still wrapped in darkness. A small group steps carefully over the threshold, carrying the bundled figure upon a simple support of reeds and wood. Their sandals meet the packed earth with a soft, dry scrape. No one hurries. The quiet procession moves as though haste might offend the solemn distance now opening around the dead. You walk among them, close enough to smell wool, lamp smoke, and the faint dampness of the night air. The streets of the city seem altered by this passage. Walls that normally contain voices and cooking fires now stand silent, their mud brick faces silvered beneath the moon. A dog watches from beside a doorway, then lowers its head. Somewhere beyond the houses, the river flows without ceremony, keeping its ancient course through fields and darkness. For the living, this journey leads toward burial ground, earth, and mourning duties. For the person carried in silence, the Sumerian imagination suggests another road entirely. It descends beneath familiar streets, beneath irrigation channels, beneath planted barley and sleeping cattle. It leads into a country that cannot be reached by walking feet, though poets speak of it as though its route were painfully known. The road points downward. Sumerian compositions recovered from Nippur, a sacred city extensively excavated by expeditions associated with the University of Pennsylvania, repeatedly describe the underworld as a structured destination. It is not merely an empty grave or drifting mist. It has boundaries, officers, entrances, and laws. The dead do not wander freely beneath the stars. They approach a realm with its own severe order, a place whose authority begins where sunlight ends. You leave the last clustered houses behind. The ground outside the city feels cooler through thin sandals. Reeds whisper near a canal, their narrow leaves brushing together in the faint breeze. Ahead, the bearers move with measured steps, their shadows bending across the pale earth. To either side lie fields made fertile through exhausting human labor, dark furrows waiting for another season of seed and water. The dead person once understood this landscape perfectly. He knew where the canal bank softened after flooding. She knew which field belonged to a cousin, which garden offered onions, which track avoided mud after rain. Every turn in life was attached to practical memory. Yet now, in the story carried by mourners, none of that knowledge provides a way home. Below the earth, there are no bright fields. Ancient Mesopotamian literature pictures the land of the dead as shadowed, dusty, and deprived of ordinary pleasures. Its inhabitants no longer enjoy the abundance visible in a market at morning, with fish laid on mats, beer poured into bowls, and warm bread lifted from ovens. Their realm is an echo of existence, not a second lively city tucked comfortably beneath the first. The image is spare because death strips away the ease of ordinary things. Perhaps this is why the road matters so deeply. A door closes quickly. A road gives time for realization. Along a road, you may still imagine turning around. Along a road, each step places familiar life slightly farther away. Even when the journey belongs to poetry, its emotional truth remains painfully recognizable. Loss rarely arrives as a single blow. It lengthens into distance. The bearers pause where the path rises over a dry ridge. Someone adjusts the weight against one shoulder. A relative breathes sharply, then composes himself. The city's outline sits behind you now, low and dark beneath the night sky. From here, it appears almost peaceful, as though every room inside it contained sleeping families instead of worry, illness, debts, quarrels, and the sudden absence of one irreplaceable person. The moonlight makes the dust shine softly. In one ancient account, a dying king is troubled not only by his fate, but by the realization that magnificence cannot prevent his descent. His palace, victories, household treasures, and ceremonial power remain in the upper world. What travels downward is not the full display of his kingship, but a diminished presence entering the company of the dead. This was an uncomfortable lesson for royal listeners. Crowns are impressively useful, right until the road refuses to notice them. The literature sometimes gives the dead a condition resembling that of birds, clothed in feathers within the dark house below. It is a strange and haunting detail, less like glorious flight than the rustling confinement of creatures unable to find open sky. Perhaps such imagery came from dreams, from ritual performance, or from the observation of birds nesting in ruined places. No one can say with certainty. Yet the picture remains in the mind countless quiet beings gathered beneath the earth, their wings offering no escape. A distant jackal cries somewhere beyond the cultivated land. One mourner mutters a protective phrase under his breath, not loudly enough for you to catch each word. The sound vanishes into the open plain. Night outside, a city is immense in this age. There are no lamps spread along the horizon, no engine noise, no bright roads joining settlements together. Darkness arrives complete, holding the fields, marshes, tombs, and travelers in one deep silence. That silence gives shape to the unseen route. You begin to sense why people might imagine the dead needing guidance, dignity, and proper ceremony. The body is carried by relatives, but the unseen traveler must somehow face a path alone. The living can accompany a burial. They cannot cross the border described in the poems. Their voices must stop at the edge of earth and absence. Scholars continue to debate whether these underworld journeys describe beliefs held widely by ordinary families, or whether they belong mainly to temple literature and royal storytelling. A scribe composing for an educated audience may shape death differently from a grieving mother in a small courtyard. Yet stories do not remain alive for centuries unless they touch a fear people already recognize. The road below endures because it gives a form to separation. The procession resumes. Your ears catch the creak of reed bindings as the burden shifts. A young man carries a small jar close against his chest. An older relative holds a lamp guarded by one hand against the wind. Its flame appears fragile in the broad darkness, a small human refusal to let the journey pass entirely unseen. The flame cannot challenge the night. It can only accompany sorrow for a little distance. As the burial place draws nearer, the earth seems less like ordinary ground. It becomes a surface dividing two kinds of existence, Above it lie speech, touch, food, sunlight, and the comfort of being recognized by familiar eyes. Beneath it lies the imagined kingdom of shadows, where the newcomer must learn an existence without the habits that once made life feel secure. You feel the roughness of dust settling against your ankle. It is a humble sensation, barely worth noticing on any other night. Yet the dead have entered a story in which dust becomes almost everything road, dwelling, meal, and horizon. Human beings build cities to rise above the ground, then find that every path eventually bends back toward it. At the edge of the grave, the bearers finally stop. Nobody speaks for several breaths. The lamp flame narrows, steadies, and throws a trembling shape across the opened earth. The person who once crossed busy courtyards and sunlit fields has reached the visible end of human escort. The deeper journey belongs to darkness. The first gate stands beneath no visible hill, carved into no landscape that living eyes can reach. It rises in the imagination as a doorway of stone, blackened by ages without sunlight, watched by a keeper who has learned never to be impressed. Before it comes a goddess radiant with authority, carrying the brilliant signs that make temples tremble and kings speak carefully. Her name is Inanna. She is not presented as timid, lost, or unaware. She comes dressed for command, wearing the full language of power upon her body. A headdress lifts her presence above ordinary beings. Blue beads rest cool against her neck and breast. A golden ring catches the faintest imagined light. In her hand, she carries measuring instruments, signs of judgment, arrangement, and control. Over her body lies the splendid garment of ladyship, a visible declaration that she belongs to the heights. You hear the approach in the darkness. Metal touches bead. Cloth moves against skin. Her footsteps carry the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to doors opening before she reaches them. Perhaps this is how power always sounds at first, even when approaching a place where power will not be recognized. At the gate, she announces herself. The gatekeeper listens, then carries her arrival inward to the ruler of the world below. His orders return with perfect calm. The doors are to be secured. Then each gate is to open separately, and at each entrance something must be taken from the visitor. No argument is offered. No explanation softens the demand. The law of the lower realm begins not with violence, but with procedure. There is something especially unsettling about procedure. The Oxford reconstruction of this Sumerian poem preserves the sequence in careful detail. The objects removed from Inanna are not vague poetic shadows. They are named pieces of her displayed identity, lifted away one by one across 7 thresholds. This is one reason the story has remained so compelling. The descent is not merely movement into darkness. It is an orderly unmaking. The first door opens a narrow distance. The air beyond it feels dry upon your face, as though the darkness has been storing dust for centuries. Inanna steps forward, and the pure headdress is removed from her head. It is the ornament that announces sacred elevation, the sign visible from across a court or crowded shrine. Without it, her head seems suddenly vulnerable, exposed to a space where rank cannot protect her. She asks what is happening. The answer is unyielding. The rites of the underworld are being fulfilled, and she must not speak against them. The words fall softly. That makes them worse. At the second gate, the small blue beads are taken from her neck. You picture them gathered in a keeper's hand, each polished stone once gleaming against warm skin, now swallowed by a place without mourning. Beads are small objects, yet human beings understand their importance. A necklace can hold beauty, wealth, memory, flirtation, ceremony, inheritance. Remove it, and something private disappears with it. Inanna moves inward. At the third gate, the twin ornaments resting against her breast are removed. The gesture feels closer now, nearer to the center of breath and heartbeat. She is still a goddess. She is still named and recognized. Yet the doorway demands another offering, another visible certainty surrendered without bargaining. At the fourth, the breast ornament bearing an invitation of desire is taken away. Inanna's power is connected with attraction, fertility, passion, and the dangerous energy that causes life to seek life. Yet here, beneath the upper world, desire gains no special privilege. Beauty does not persuade the gate. Charm does not alter the rule. The keeper performs his task without embarrassment or admiration. It is almost rude. Really, a goddess arrives dressed magnificently, and the underworld behaves like an unsympathetic cloakroom with permanent ownership policies. The thought fades as the fifth gate waits ahead. From her hand, the golden ring is removed. Gold belongs to sunlight. It flashes in temples, lies against royal fingers, glows on statues offered to gods. In darkness, its warm brilliance becomes pointless. The ring may suggest promise, possession, or authority. But the realm below has no need to admire its shine. Her hand is emptied of one more claim upon the world. You listen to the small imagined sound of metal leaving skin. At the sixth gate, her blue measuring rod and measuring line are taken. These are no simple ornaments. They suggest her ability to set boundaries, establish order, and define the proper shape of things. Builders rely upon measures. Rulers rely upon boundaries. Priests rely upon correct arrangements within sacred places. To carry such tools is to say that reality can be organized beneath your hand. But she does not measure this place. This place measures her. Here, the poem becomes almost unbearably precise. A person can lose ornaments and still imagine remaining powerful within. A person can lose admired beauty and still cling to intelligence or office. Yet when the instruments of control are removed, the loss touches the heart of command. The visitor no longer enters as one who determines order. She enters as one placed beneath it. Historians and specialists in ancient religion continue to disagree about how these gates should be understood. Some view the stripping as a ritual humiliation required before appearing in a hostile court. Others see a drama of divine power confronting its limits. Some readers detect the rhythms of death and renewal, while others warn that modern symbolic interpretations may place meanings upon a poem shaped by very different sacred assumptions. The disagreement is valuable. It prevents the darkness from becoming too neat. Then comes the seventh gate. By now, the ornaments are gone. Her head bears no sign of majesty. Her neck and breast hold no glittering declaration of beauty or sacred station. Her hand carries neither gold nor the tools of order. Still, one final covering remains, the rich garment marking her as lady and ruler, the clothing that gathers every remaining fragment of dignity into one visible form. The gate opens. The garment is removed from her body. No ornament remains between Inanna and the laws of the lower realm. No ceremonial splendor announces that she should receive gentler treatment. The goddess who entered dressed in the architecture of authority now stands without the protections by which the upper world knew her. She has not changed her name. She has not ceased to be powerful in every story told above. Yet here, her identity has been reduced to bare presence. You feel the meaning of the 7 doors settling slowly around you. It is tempting to count them as moments. to imagine each threshold as a measured passage within the mystery of dying. Yet the poem does something more delicate than keeping time. It reveals how a self might be separated from everything it believes essential. First, the sign of honor, then adornment, then attraction, then possession, then control. Finally, the last garment of station. What remains when each is taken? A fringe interpretation, sometimes repeated in modern retellings, imagines the gates as hidden spiritual centers within the body, each opening through a ritual release. It is an evocative idea, glowing softly with modern mysticism, but it is not stated by the ancient Sumerian tablets. The original poem is stranger in its restraint. It provides doors, removals, a question, and a law that cannot be argued away. That restraint is enough. The underworld does not ask Inanna to describe herself. It does not ask what she achieved, whom she loved, or what songs were sung in her temples. It simply removes the things that make an entrance impressive. One gate at a time, the dazzling visitor becomes a solitary presence in a silent kingdom. You stand near the seventh threshold, listening to the hush where jewelry no longer chimes. Beyond it waits a court without sunlight, without applause, and without any interest in appearances. The last cloth settles upon the ground. For one quiet instant, even a goddess has nothing left to display. Beyond the last doorway, the darkness does not widen into emptiness. It gathers itself into a hall, immense and airless, with walls that seem carved from the weight of buried centuries. Dust lies upon the floor in pale layers, untouched by wind or rain. No flame trembles here. No window offers a strip of morning. The place possesses its own dimness, a murky visibility in which every form appears half-remembered. At the far end sits a throne. The figure upon it does not rise to greet the visitor. She does not need to. Her stillness is greater than movement, and her authority fills the chamber without ceremony. She is Ereshkigal, ruler of the great realm beneath the living world, queen of those whose voices no longer reach the courtyards above. Her name carries the severe dignity of a door that opens only inward. You feel no theatrical terror in her presence. There is something colder than fury here. She has seen every kind of arrival. Infants carried into silence before learning speech, farmers taken from their fields, women whose households still carry the shape of their labor, soldiers whose confidence failed at the final border, kings wrapped in fine cloth, accompanied by gifts, prayers, and desperate attempts at distinction. All arrive beneath her gaze. Inanna stands before the throne without the bright signs of her station. The chamber does not echo with admiration. Those who inhabit this place do not gather to wonder at her beauty, nor whisper about her temples, nor measure her influence among cities. The queen below beholds the queen from above, and the silence between them feels older than affection, older than rivalry, older than the first hand pressed into clay. The Sumerian poem preserved through the tablet tradition collected at Oxford names Ereshkigal as the power before whom the visitor is brought. In this account, the underworld is no shapeless cloud of grief. It is governed. It has a ruler, attendants, decisions, and rules no arriving person can dismiss through prestige. Such a vision offers no comforting chaos. Even death has administration. You may allow yourself the smallest tired smile. Humanity has imagined many horrors, but one of the most persistent is discovering that the final mystery also has official procedure. Then the smile passes. Ereshkigal is not a queen surrounded by the bright luxuries of an earthly court. No gardens perfume the air around her. No musicians soothe the edges of a banquet. Her kingdom is composed of absence, of dim shapes and diminished needs, of those separated from bread ovens, river water, warm beds, and the voices that once called their names. She rules not because she has escaped death's condition, but because she embodies its permanence. A faint sound crosses the chamber. It may be cloth against dust, or the whispering movement of the gathered dead. They stand at the edges, almost indistinguishable from the darkness holding them. There are many of them, too many to count. Their outlines suggest heads bowed beneath long endurance, their presence quieted into a common submission. No one here appears astonished. In the cities of Sumer, power is displayed through height, sound, and shining surfaces. Temples rise above houses. Processions carry music through crowded streets. Statues receive offerings in rooms scented with oil. Rulers leave inscriptions announcing victories and building works, hoping their names might endure longer than their bodies. Yet Ereshkigal occupies a realm where height has collapsed into depth, where all processions arrive without applause, and where an inscription cannot make its owner breathe again. The throne beneath the earth is therefore an uncomfortable image. It suggests that human order does not disappear at death, but becomes helpless before a greater order. A king may command laborers to shape bricks, dig canals, raise walls, and carve his praise into stone. He cannot command the dust to refuse him. A priest may speak correctly before every sacred image of his city. He cannot persuade the lower gate to become an upper door. Your ears begin to notice breathing, though it cannot belong to the dead. It comes from the queen herself. In the poem, Ereshkigal is not merely a motionless symbol of rule. She is a figure of powerful disturbance, capable of rage, grief, and bodily anguish. Her reactions make her stranger, not simpler. The ruler of death is not free from suffering. The one seated above all below is also enclosed within the kingdom she governs. A peculiar modern tale sometimes attaches itself to her image. People occasionally point to a famous clay relief showing a winged woman with clawed feet, flanked by owls, and confidently call it Ereshkigal. The object is haunting, certainly, with the kind of expression that could spoil an otherwise peaceful museum afternoon. Yet specialists have never reached agreement about the figure's identity. She may be a goddess, a night being, or another sacred presence entirely. The darkness encourages naming, but it does not always confirm our guesses. The throne remains before you. Inanna has entered this hall voluntarily, yet willingness does not grant command. Her arrival poses a silent challenge. Can a deity associated with life, desire, power, and the upward surge of human longing occupy the realm that consumes every rising thing? Can one who commands worship in bright temples claim a place in a kingdom ruled by necessary ending? No gentle welcome answers her. The queen below fixes upon her visitor the look of death. It is an arresting phrase within the ancient poem, simple enough to pass quickly across the mind, yet heavy enough to remain there. A look may seem like very little. It contains no weapon, no shouted curse, no spectacle, but anyone who has sat beside the newly dead understands how much can change through a face, through eyes, through the recognition that the living warmth of relationship is gone. The look of death is final recognition. Scholars have approached Ereshkigal from several directions. Some interpret her court as the stern boundary separating divine regions, a warning that even gods possess limits. Others emphasize family tension, sacred authority, or the ritual language surrounding loss and restoration. Still others caution that the poem was copied in scribal schools and its dramatic queen may reveal literary craft as much as everyday funeral belief. The tablets invite interpretation, but they refuse easy certainty. That refusal suits her. Ereshkigal does not explain the nature of dying to those who enter her hall. She rules its consequence. Her throne is less a place of moral reward or punishment than a seat of irreversible belonging. The newly dead are not presented as customers selecting their preferred eternity. They are received into a condition which the living can soften through care, but cannot cancel. You see why this image unsettles so gently. It offers no roaring furnace, no gleaming paradise withheld from unfortunate travelers. It suggests instead a vast, quiet country where all distinctions begin fading under the same dust. The beloved child and feared ruler share the same dim horizon. The clever scribe and weary laborer lose the sounds that once separated their lives. Each becomes someone remembered above, while remaining beneath the authority of a queen who does not forget her claim. The chamber seems to breathe around you. Ereshkigal lifts no hand in mercy or threat. She simply remains seated, as fixed as night beneath the soil, while the stripped visitor stands exposed before her. There is no bright object left to distract the eye. No title glitters in the dark. Only presence meets presence. Only the silent ruler, and the soul that has reached her. A sound like dry reeds brushing together moves through the dim chamber. It is not wind, for no wind travels so far beneath the fields. Shapes step out from the surrounding gloom, neither rushing nor hesitating, as though they have stood ready since the oldest burial. They arrange themselves with the solemn patience of officials summoned to an ancient duty. There are 7 of them. They are the Anuna, divine figures whose names belong to the deepest structures of Sumerian imagination. In the underworld poem reconstructed by scholars at Oxford, they appear as 7 judges who issue their decision against Inanna. The detail is stark and brief. The visitor stands exposed within the lower court, and the judges do not ask for gold, persuasion, or explanation. Their authority is expressed through decision, gaze, voice, and consequence. You watch them gather in a half-circle before the stripped goddess. Their faces are difficult to distinguish in the dust-colored gloom. Perhaps that is fitting. A judge is more frightening when personality disappears, leaving only office. One figure may feel pity, another anger, another indifference. Yet the court speaks as one body. Inanna has crossed into a domain whose law does not bend around her brilliance. The hall has become orderly now. You notice low seats set along the stone, clay tablets resting near a shadowed attendant, and a surface that might serve as a table for recording decrees. None of this is described as furniture in the poem. Your mind supplies it from the world above, where Sumerian life depends upon careful records. Barley is counted, fields are measured, rations are allotted, disputes are witnessed. Temple estates possess inventories so patient and detailed that even a sleepy accountant might feel briefly admired. Why should the underworld seem less organized? In the cities beside the rivers, order is sacred because disorder threatens survival. A damaged canal can starve a neighborhood. A disputed boundary can poison several generations. A missing ration can turn a worker's household desperate. The scribes press marks into clay because memory alone is too soft for matters of consequence. A society built upon calculation naturally imagines that the invisible world may also keep its own severe account. Yet this is not a courtroom like one you would recognize. No advocate steps forward to argue that Inanna has made excellent contributions to civic life. No witness praises her festivals, her temples, or the songs sung under her protection. The underworld does not appear interested in a balanced biography. The decision concerns her presence here, her intrusion into a kingdom governed by powers other than her own. She is seen. The judges direct their gaze upon her, and that gaze carries death. They address her, and their speech bears condemnation. They raise their voices, and the sound fixes the judgment in the chamber. What happens is swift, almost ceremonial in its economy. The great goddess, once covered in symbols of command, collapses under an authority she cannot charm or overrule. Dust stirs beneath her. For the ancient listener, this scene may have carried several kinds of unease. One is obvious if a goddess can be judged below. What shelter belongs to a mortal, a farmer, cannot arrive displaying divine ornaments. A brewer cannot announce sacred privileges. A mother whose hands are cracked from grinding grain cannot demand that 7 judges reconsider the nature of death. The poem concerns a goddess, yet its silence around ordinary human exemption is difficult to ignore. Another unease lies deeper. Judgment here is not clearly the moral examination familiar from other religious traditions. There is no neat list of kindnesses weighed against cruelties. There is no cheerful expectation that a decent person receives a garden and an irritating neighbor receives dust. Instead, the judgment seems bound to the underworld's rules, to trespass, authority, and the inescapable condition of descending. This distinction matters. People sometimes borrow an image from ancient Egypt and place it inside every ancient account of death. A soul standing shall its heart is weighed against a symbol of truth. It is a beautiful and powerful scene, but it does not belong on a Sumerian tablet simply because both civilizations knew grief and built with mud. The 7 judges of Inanna's poem hold no balance for her heart. They deliver a verdict through their terrible collective authority. Even antiquity suffers from mixed-up paperwork. A scribe in a tablet house might smile faintly at that confusion, then return to sharpening his reed. He would know that stories have exact shapes, even when their meanings remain difficult. A 7-fold court is not automatically a moral tribunal for every dead person. It may reveal a sacred boundary crossed by one dangerous divine visitor. It may suggest broader ideas about the dead. It may do both, without becoming a complete handbook for eternity. This is where learned disagreement still lingers. Some specialists read the scene as evidence for a genuine underworld judiciary, a divine structure imagined as governing the dead. Others argue that Inanna faces judgment because her descent is exceptional, and ordinary souls may not have undergone anything resembling her trial. There are also scholars who see the 7 judges primarily as part of the poem's dramatic machinery, making her defeat final enough for the tale to turn toward rescue and exchange. The tablets keep their composure. They do not settle the argument. You move closer to the gathering, though every instinct suggests remaining hidden among the shadows. At the edge of the court stands a newly arrived human spirit, hardly noticed beside the fallen goddess. Perhaps he is a potter who once turned wet clay under bright morning sun. Perhaps she is a singer whose voice once rose during offerings. The spirit watches the judges with a helpless attention. No crown was removed from this person. No jeweled ornaments marked a splendid entrance. Ordinary life arrives already lightly dressed. Would such a soul be judged? Perhaps not in the manner of Inanna. Perhaps the dead are simply assigned their place, folded into the dusty population beneath the ground. Yet to live in a civilization shaped by decrees, ranks, offerings, duties, and divine decisions is to suspect that nothing important occurs without order. Birth places you in a household. Work places you in service. Burial places you among ancestors. It is possible that death, too, was imagined as an entry recorded somewhere beyond sight. On one side of the chamber, a curious object glints faintly beneath dust. It resembles a seal, the small carved cylinder used above ground to impress identity and authority upon clay. A seal could mark ownership, approve a transaction, or establish that a particular person stood behind a document. There is no tablet passage declaring that underworld judges stamped the fate of each soul. Still, the image is haunting. All through life, human beings leave impressions. In death, perhaps they wonder whether any impression remains. The seven figures do not move now. Their task concerning Inanna has been fulfilled. Their silence seems heavier than their voices, because a pronounced judgment ends argument, while silence allows meaning to spread. Around them, the dead continue their muted existence, not raging against the court, not celebrating its decisions, simply enduring within the pattern assigned to them. You sense that this was the deeper fear carried by the story. Death is not merely darkness. Darkness might be crossed or escaped. Death is a system, a house with gates, a queen with authority, and judges whose decisions do not depend upon the wishes of the one standing before them. Above the earth, a person may spend years becoming visible. A name is spoken in markets, recorded on tablets, called by children, praised by friends, resented by rivals. Down here, visibility changes. To be seen by the court is not to be cherished. It is to be recognized as someone now belonging to the law of the lower world. The judges turn their faces away. The gathered shadows remain, and somewhere in the dust, an unseen record seems to close. Morning comes softly to the house, bringing a gray light across the courtyard floor. The household has not slept in any complete sense. Bodies have rested against walls. Heads have lowered. Eyes have closed briefly. Yet sorrow keeps its own watch. When the first birds begin calling from the roof edges, a woman rises and moves toward the grinding stone. Her hands know what to do. She takes grain from a storage jar, measures it without speaking, and begins the familiar circular motion. Stone meets stone with a low, steady rasp. Yesterday, that sound belonged to breakfast, work, children, ordinary hunger. Today, every movement seems directed toward someone who can no longer step into the courtyard and ask whether the bread is ready. Water is poured into a small bowl. Flour gathers beneath her fingers. She shapes a modest portion. Nothing splendid. Nothing designed to impress a visiting official or a demanding uncle. It is simply food, the most ancient form of human reassurance. While there is bread, someone belongs to the household. While water is offered, someone has not entirely been abandoned. You sit nearby in the cooling shade, listening to the scrape of grain and the occasional cooing of pigeons above the wall. The smell of damp flour rises gently into the air. A child watches from a doorway, unusually silent, perhaps understanding that this bread is not for the morning meal. The child sees his mother place it upon a small dish, then fill a cup with clear water drawn carefully from the household jar. In ancient Mesopotamia, the dead were not always released into complete separation. They could remain members of the family, dependent upon gestures performed by surviving hands. Offerings of food and drink appear in texts concerned with the dead, and archaeological work in southern Iraq has revealed burials equipped with vessels and, in certain tomb settings at installations, understood as allowing liquids to reach the grave below. The Penn Museum preserves the history of those excavations, where graves beneath the soil yielded cups, bowls, jars, and the patient evidence of care. These objects do not speak in full sentences, but they do not need to. Someone knelt before the earth. Someone chose a vessel. Someone believed that placing nourishment near the dead carried meaning beyond simple disposal of property. The woman crosses the courtyard with the bread and water. There is no grand temple choir accompanying her. No procession announces that she is performing an act upon which the comfort of a departed spirit may depend. Her bare feet touch the cool floor. Her garment brushes the clay wall. She reaches a quiet place associated with the dead of the household, and there she lowers the dish and cup with a tenderness that seems almost apologetic. Perhaps she speaks the name. Names matter greatly in a world where writing exists, yet most memory still lives upon the tongue. A name can be entered upon a tablet, marked on a seal, spoken in a contract, called across a market, or whispered over a sleeping child. When death arrives, the name changes its purpose. It no longer summons a person into the room. It keeps that person from disappearing entirely. The dead cannot grind grain. They cannot walk to the canal, lift a jar, break bread, or join the household beneath the shade of reeds. If they require sustenance, it must be carried toward them by those who still possess warm hands. This belief places a quiet burden upon love. Mourning is not only crying for the vanished face, it is continuing to care for someone whose needs can no longer be confirmed. That uncertainty is painful. It is also deeply human. A family might offer water because the dead truly thirst in the dusty world below. They might offer bread because no decent household allows one of its own to hunger. They might perform the rite because ancestors must be treated respectfully, lest neglect disturb the fragile safety of the living. Perhaps all these feelings mingle together, as they often do around graves, where devotion and fear rarely keep tidy boundaries. Scholars still discuss the balance between those meanings. Some emphasize the anxiety surrounding restless spirits, suggesting that offerings helped keep the dead satisfied and safely distant. Others, including researchers studying remembrance in Mesopotamian families, see a more intimate relationship, in which offerings continued the bonds of kinship across the grave. The dead may have been feared at times, but they were also mourned, fed, named, and kept within the circle of family duty. The bread cools upon its dish, a fly settles on the rim, then lifts away. The cup catches a pale square of morning sky. To modern eyes, leaving food for someone who cannot visibly consume it may seem sad, charming, or strangely impractical. Yet modern people place flowers upon graves, save old messages, touch photographs, and speak aloud in empty rooms. Human beings have always found methods of giving where no reply can arrive. A curious detail emerges from the buried chambers at Ur. In certain grave structures, narrow channels or pipes descended from above, apparently designed so liquid offerings could be poured downward without reopening the tomb. It is a wonderfully practical arrangement for a profoundly mysterious problem. The dead may dwell beyond sight, but someone has thoughtfully considered the plumbing. You hear the gentle trickle in your mind. Water leaves the cup, enters the dark opening, and vanishes into earth. Above, the pourer sees only absence. Below, imagination completes the gesture. In a land where heat dries lips quickly and dust coats every sandal. Water is never a decorative offering. Water is relief. Water is survival. Water is the difference between endurance and torment. For the dead imagined in the lower country, thirst would be especially bitter. They no longer stand beside the river breeze. They no longer receive a cup from a smiling relative after labor. Their world is described through dust, confinement, and deprivation. A stream of poured water therefore carries more than moisture. It carries the memory of being cared for. The bread offers another kind of comfort. Bread belongs to routine. It appears at the beginning of a day, beside beer, onions, fish, conversation, and complaint. It is shaped by family labor and shared through familiar habits. To set bread aside for the departed is to say that death has changed the person's condition, but has not yet erased the person's place at the table. Perhaps an older man enters the courtyard now. He pauses beside the offering and murmurs the names of ancestors farther back, parents and grandparents whose faces the child at the doorway has never seen. A family becomes longer through such speech. It stretches downward through generations, each remembered person receiving a brief return into air and sound. This is not immortality in the shining sense. The dead do not rise smiling from the earth, restored to youth beneath fragrant trees. Their continuation is smaller, more fragile, and therefore perhaps more moving. They endure partly through the discipline of those who remember to pour, to place, to speak. What happens to the one who has no one? The question must have haunted every crowded city and every lonely burial. Not everyone leaves children. Not every family remains prosperous. War, hunger, migration, resentment, and simple forgetfulness can silence a name. A person once surrounded by voices may slowly lose the offerings that tied them to the world of warmth and meals. The dish remains on the ground as sunlight reaches the courtyard wall. Daily work resumes because it must. Grain requires measuring. Animals require feeding. Water jars must be carried and refilled. Yet within that practical movement lies one quiet alteration. A portion has been given away to silence. The family has eaten less, so the dead may not be forgotten, and beneath the house, beneath the dust, beneath the reach of sunlight, memory descends like a small cup of water into an immeasurable thirst. A low murmur spreads through Uruk long before the sun reaches the eastern wall. It passes from courtyard to courtyard, through workshops and storehouses, along streets where merchants usually argue over measures of grain. This morning, their voices fade quickly. Doors remain open, yet nobody steps through them with ordinary purpose. The city has received a message it cannot dismiss. Its king is dying. You stand upon the broad wall as pale light settles over the bricks. Below, the city stretches in ordered shapes, its lanes curving between houses, shrines, workshops, and shaded enclosures. These walls have carried the king's name across generations of storytelling. They are strong, immense, and beautifully useless against the quiet enemy now entering his chamber. Within the palace, attendants walk with lowered eyes. Linen has been brought. Precious oils wait in small vessels. Musicians hold their instruments without playing, uncertain whether sound would honor the king or disturb his last hours. Officials remain near the doorway, men trained to settle disputes and command labor, now discovering that there is no decree for this. Upon a couch lies Gilgamesh, ruler of Uruk, hero of songs, builder in memory, and man beneath every title. In the Sumerian poem concerning his death, preserved in fragments and reconstructed by specialists at Oxford, the king is confronted by a truth that refuses royal negotiation. Humanity includes an ending. The darkest day awaits him, as it waits for every person born into the sunlight. His fame does not cancel the appointment. His strength does not delay the summons. Even a ruler whose name survives upon clay enters the human condition without exemption. You can almost feel his anger. A king spends his life surrounded by evidence that commands matter. He speaks, and workers gather. He decides, and gates open. He offers gifts, and temples glow with new objects. He leads, and others place their bodies between his desire and danger. It is understandable that such a man might find death especially insulting. Death does not bow. It does not request an audience. It simply arrives, with all the tact of a tax collector who knows the account is final. Near the couch, an elderly woman watches his breathing. She is Ninsun in the old stories, his divine mother, wise and sorrowful, a figure who knows the terrible border her son approaches. Around her stand household members, commanders, servants, and priests, each seeing a different part of him. To one, he is a king; to another, a patron; to another, a difficult master; to her, despite every triumph, he is still the child once held against her body. His breath catches. Outside, people begin gathering near the palace. Bakers leave dough covered in bowls. Metalworkers allow fires to cool. A woman carrying dates pauses in the street, listening for news. Perhaps some truly love him. Perhaps some fear what follows the death of power. Perhaps others remember burdens demanded in his name and feel grief mixed with guarded relief. A city never mourns with one heart, however polished its official lament may become. Still, the silence grows. The king's chamber carries the scent of cedar oil, woven cloth, sweat, and incense. A cup remains near his hand. It is finer than the vessel beside an ordinary deathbed, decorated with care and held by attendants whose lives depend upon serving correctly. Yet the hand beside it cannot close around its rim. Gold can arrange comfort around dying. It cannot teach fingers to hold life. In the poem, a divine assembly considers Gilgamesh and his fate. His achievements are remembered. His unusual greatness is recognized. He is not reduced to an anonymous shadow without history. Yet recognition does not produce immortality. The decision offers dignity within the world below, perhaps even a respected role among its inhabitants, but not release from descending. This is a bitter kind of honor. Imagine receiving the finest seat in a house you never wished to enter. Imagine being praised for your greatness while the door to daylight closes behind you. Human beings have perfected this custom in many ages, arranging magnificent ceremonies around outcomes nobody requested. Attendants begin carrying objects into an adjoining room. Weapons, vessels, cloth, ornaments, and gifts are examined with solemn care. A ruler's burial is never merely private sorrow. It is public language. The city must demonstrate that the king does not vanish like an unclaimed traveler on a lonely road. His journey must appear furnished, respected, and worthy of the order he commanded above. Records from ancient Mesopotamia confirm that elite burial could involve astonishing displays of wealth and ceremony. The royal graves at Ur, excavated by the University of Pennsylvania and the British Museum, revealed gold, silver, lapis-colored ornaments, musical instruments, vehicles, vessels, and the costly theater of royal identity. Those graves do not belong to Gilgamesh himself, yet they show how intensely status could follow the dead into the earth, or try to follow them, for beneath the glitter rests the same uncooperative fact. A golden cup cannot satisfy a mouth that no longer drinks. A weapon cannot threaten the gatekeeper below. A splendid headdress might announce importance to mourners, but dust possesses an ancient habit of settling evenly. Gilgamesh turns his face slightly, perhaps toward the sound of lamentation rising beyond the chamber. His city is there, close enough to hear, impossible to keep. Walls may preserve his name. Stories may enlarge him until he seems more God than man. Scribes may copy his struggles for centuries, placing fresh clay beneath the pressure of his memory. None of those acts allows him to rise from the couch and walk again through the streets he ruled. A peculiar tradition clings to the king's burial in later fragments and modern discussion. It imagines the people of Uruk diverting the river, preparing a resting place beneath its bed, then allowing the water to return above their hidden ruler. The image is irresistible, a king concealed beneath the flowing life of his city, guarded by mud, current, and secrecy. Archaeologists have even wondered whether traces of such a burial might someday be found. Yet the matter remains uncertain. Broken texts encourage beautiful possibilities, and beautiful possibilities often travel farther than proof. Specialists disagree about the poem's missing portions, the identity of the dying figure in damaged passages, and how much any burial description preserves historical memory. The king's grave remains part scholarship, part mist, part wish to find a famous man beneath famous earth. Within the palace, the final breath leaves him. No wall collapses. No star falls. The river continues sliding beside the city, carrying silt, reeds, reflected light, and the indifferent patience of water. An attendant covers the king's face. Ninsun lowers her head. Someone outside hears the first clear cry of mourning and begins to weep. You look at the royal objects waiting in ordered rows. Their beauty is genuine. Their helplessness is greater. They can express love, loyalty, fear, ambition, and political display. They can tell future excavators that a remarkable death took place among remarkable people. They cannot purchase a different road. The king has built, commanded, desired, fought, and been remembered. Now he enters without his crown. The river moves through evening light, carrying reeds, fallen leaves, and slow ribbons of reflected bronze. Along the bank, the air smells of wet silt and fish smoke, while small insects tremble above the water. You hear a city behind you settling into night. Yet one man cannot settle anywhere. He has lost the companion whose voice once made danger seem bearable. Gilgamesh calls for Enkidu, not as a king summoning a servant, not as a hero demanding an answer from the universe. He calls as someone whose grief has stripped language down to its simplest need. Speak to me again. Tell me what you see. Tell me whether the friend who shared dust, laughter, fear, and exhaustion still exists somewhere beyond the reach of living hands. The earth does not answer immediately. In a Sumerian poem known through tablets studied and assembled by scholars at Oxford, Gilgamesh loses objects that fall into the underworld, and Enkidu offers to retrieve them. The tale changes into something far more sorrowful when Enkidu becomes trapped below. At last, through divine intervention, an opening is made in the earth, and his spirit rises like a breath of air from a crack in the ground. Not his warm body, not the companion who could sit beside a fire and complain about sore feet. What returns is a ghostly presence, enough for speech, enough for recognition, enough to make grief more complicated rather than less. Gilgamesh beholds his friend, and instead of asking about treasures, lost tools, or heroic fame, he asks the question that has haunted every mourner. What is the underworld like? Enkidu hesitates. There are truths that affection almost refuses to speak. He tells his friend that, should he describe the customs of the lower realm, Gilgamesh would sit down and weep. The warning has remarkable tenderness. Enkidu is dead, yet he still tries to protect the living man from knowledge. Death has taken his place among human beings, but it has not entirely taken his kindness. Gilgamesh insists. Then the report begins, not with a grand map of the lower country, nor with a detailed account of its ruler's palace. Enkidu speaks about the body once touched with pleasure and pride. That cherished body is eaten by creatures, covered and consumed by earth. The vision is brief and merciless. Gilgamesh throws himself down in grief, because friendship has suddenly delivered the one fact heroic stories prefer to delay. The beloved body does not remain beloved in appearance, yet Enkidu continues, and his words become stranger. Gilgamesh asks about people whose lives took different shapes above ground. What becomes of a man with one son? Enkidu answers that he weeps bitterly below. What of the man with 2 sons? His condition is somewhat better. 3 sons bring greater comfort. 4, 5, 6, and finally, 7 sons mark increasing well-being among the dead. The man with 7 sons sits among the gods and listens to judgments, satisfied and honored. You pause beside the river, hearing the numbers fall one by one. To a modern listener, this may sound brutally unfair. Must eternal comfort depend upon producing a large household? What of the gentle person without children, the woman who could not bear them, the man whose family died young? The stranger cut off from kin. The poem does not soften the matter for your sensibilities. It speaks from a society where descendants were not only beloved children, but the living hands responsible for maintaining a person's name and obligations. A large family meant many voices. Many hands could bring offerings. Many memories could survive illness, conflict, travel, and time. One grieving child might die, move away, become poor, or simply neglect the duty. 7 sons represented continuity spread across a wider human net. The lower world's arithmetic appears cold, but its earthly foundation is painfully practical. The dead fare better when the living have not run out. You can almost imagine an elderly father proudly counting children in a courtyard, receiving a look from his exhausted wife that says the underworld may not be the only place where judgment awaits him. The river gives a small ripple against the mud. Gilgamesh asks about a palace servant, and Enkidu describes a man receiving food with dignity. He asks about a young man taken before marriage, and the answer contains sadness for pleasures never known. He asks about a woman who died giving birth, and she is described with honor, sitting at a table of precious material. The dead are not flattened into one identical condition. Their stories, their family circumstances, and the manner in which life released them still cling to them below. Then the questions darken. What of the person whose corpse lies abandoned in open country? Enkidu's answer is chilling in its simplicity. His spirit does not rest in the underworld. What of the person who has no one to make funerary offerings? He eats scraps and crumbs thrown into the street. Whatever unwanted remnants can be found. There it is, the terror beneath the city's order, not torture by monstrous beings, not flames leaping around a guilty soul. The dreadful fate is exclusion. To lie unburied is to lack a proper entrance into the community of the dead. To be forgotten is to live from rubbish while others receive the care of remembered kin. The underworld mirrors human society with uncomfortable accuracy. Even in death, the lonely remain vulnerable. Excavations in Mesopotamian settlements support the deep importance of proper burial and household connection. Archaeologists from the University of Pennsylvania found graves placed within domestic settings at Ur, revealing how closely the dead could remain joined to family life. Enkidu's testimony gives literary shape to the same concern. A burial is not only where a body rests, It is where a relationship continues to have an address. The poem contains another bewildering detail. Gilgamesh asks about one whose body was consumed by fire, and Enkidu says his spirit is not present below. His smoke has risen into the sky. For people accustomed to burial in earth, fire may have represented not purification, but dispersal, a loss of the body required for proper underworld existence. It is a curious glimpse of ancient unease, far removed from later traditions that honor cremation as sacred release. Researchers do not agree on how broadly these descriptions should be applied. Some regard Enkidu's report as a vivid reflection of common Mesopotamian beliefs about burial and family duty. Others caution that it is a literary conversation, shaped for emotional force rather than systematic doctrine. The numerical ranking of suns may describe social expectations as strongly as religious conviction. A poem can reveal a society's fear without serving as its official census of souls. Still, you feel the force of the report. Gilgamesh does not receive a secret path around death. Enkidu brings no whispered formula, no hidden word that allows a favored friend to walk home. He brings information more ordinary and more painful. Bodies decay. Burial matters. Children matter. Memory matters. The living possess a fragile power to ease the fate of those they lose. Yet that power depends upon loyalty, continuing through years when grief is no longer fresh. The opening in the earth begins to close. Enkidu's presence thins like mist rising from cool soil. His friend remains above, burdened with knowledge he demanded and cannot return. Around him, evening meals are prepared. Families call children indoors. Someone pours water. Someone sweeps crumbs from a threshold, never wondering whether a forgotten spirit waits desperately for what is being cast away. The dead friend has spoken, and his saddest message is not that the lower world is dark. It is that even there, a soul may still need to be loved. The burial chamber receives the last glow of an oil lamp, and its walls hold the scent of damp soil, wool, and crushed herbs. Those gathered at the opening do not speak loudly. Their voices have become careful instruments, meant to carry affection without calling the departed back too forcefully. A woman kneels and places her palm against the packed earth, as though the ground itself has become the shoulder of someone leaving. The body rests within a space prepared by living hands. Beside it lie useful things, modest things, objects carrying the familiar weight of daily existence. A bowl, a cup, a small personal seal, perhaps a comb, a bead, or a tool worn smooth by use. Nothing here proves that the dead can grasp, drink, dress, or work in the kingdom below. Yet removing every trace of ordinary life would feel unbearably abrupt. The mourners offer fragments of belonging, because complete separation is too sharp to endure all at once. You watch a man holding a cylinder seal between thumb and forefinger. It once rolled across wet clay, leaving a pattern that announced ownership or witnessed an agreement. In the city, such an object says, "This action is mine. This property is mine. This name has standing." He hesitates before setting it near the wrapped body, because a seal is more than carved stone. It is a small, portable certainty about who a person has been. The question enters quietly. Does identity travel? No surviving Sumerian tablet records a gate where every dead soul is formally offered two roads, one bright and one dark. There is no ancient line announcing that a spirit receives 7 measured minutes to make a final decision. The texts are more restrained, and in that restraint they become more disturbing. They suggest that death itself confronts the person with a condition that cannot be negotiated away. The choice if choice exists, is not about avoiding the lower world. It is about releasing the upper one. The man places the seal inside the grave. Its carved surface vanishes into shadow. Perhaps it comforts him to imagine that the departed remains recognizable in the darkness. Perhaps he simply cannot bear to keep using an object marked by a vanished hand. Human grief often disguises itself as practicality. You say an object should accompany its owner, when the deeper truth is that touching it has begun to hurt. A priest or household elder stands near the entrance. His garment smells faintly of smoke and cedar oil. He recites words not intended to entertain the mourners, but to place this death within an order older than their private despair. The dead person is no longer merely absent from meals and work. The dead person is being moved into another category of existence, among those who receive remembrance rather than conversation. Researchers connected with the University of Chicago's Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures have examined Mesopotamian funerary traditions as social acts, not merely as expressions of fear. Burial could transform the departed from a dangerous absence into an established member of the ancestral world. The grave was not simply a container for remains. It marked a change in relationship, a careful redrawing of the border between household and shadow. That border must be respected. A mother may long to hold her son once more, but she does not drag the body from its prepared resting place. A husband may wish to hear his wife's voice, but he does not leave the grave permanently open in case she answers. The ritual performs a painful kindness. It acknowledges attachment while teaching the living not to demand that the dead continue behaving like the living. Perhaps the soul faces a similar demand. You imagine consciousness lingering near the objects arranged with such care. The seal invites recognition. The cup suggests thirst. The cloth recalls warmth against skin. The voices above still speak a beloved name. Everything familiar seems to call the departing self backward, toward the house, the bed, the doorway, the smell of bread, the irritation of relatives, even the small troubles once considered tiresome. Life becomes precious when it cannot be entered again. Yet the lower country waits without impatience. It does not need to lure the soul with promises or chase it with threats. Its strength is quieter. Each earthly attachment has become something that can be remembered, but no longer inhabited. The dead may be honored by possessions, but cannot return to possession. They may be called by name, but cannot walk toward the caller. They may receive water, but not lift the vessel in a warm hand. The choice is made within that helplessness. To cling would be to remain turned toward a door that has already closed. To descend would be to accept a new and diminished form of belonging among ancestors, shadows, and the disciplined remembrance of those still breathing. It is not a triumphant choice. It carries none of the bright confidence modern stories sometimes give the departing spirit. It resembles the moment a tired hand finally opens, releasing something loved because holding it has become impossible. There is a strange folk imagination, echoed much later in Mesopotamian fears of troublesome ghosts, that the dead who are not settled correctly may linger at thresholds, unsettle sleepers, or attach themselves to the living through complaint and need. A creaking hinge at midnight, an illness without clear cause, a dream filled with accusation. These could become evidence that the departed had not found peace. It is an oddly intimate haunting. The ghost is not seeking conquest. The ghost is still asking to be handled properly. Even the dead, it seems, can become disappointed relatives. The gentle humor disappears as the first basket of earth is lifted. A handful falls upon the covering with a dry, intimate sound. It is softer than thunder and heavier than any royal proclamation. Another handful follows. The mourners hear the separation becoming physical. The body is not simply resting in a room where someone may uncover the face. Earth is beginning to stand between the dead and every ordinary human gesture. Some scholars interpret Mesopotamian burial ritual mainly as protection for survivors, a system intended to prevent displaced spirits from bringing trouble into homes. Others argue that such customs express continuing bonds, showing the dead as enduring family members rather than hostile intruders. Both views may contain part of the ancient feeling. Love can fear what it cannot reach. Fear can remain tender toward what it has lost. The grave fills gradually. A young woman steps forward, holding a small twist of wool from a familiar garment. She brings it close to her lips, then sets it down before soil covers it. No text explains her action. No official rule may require it. Yet it carries the meaning of a final private surrender. This belonged to your life with us. Now it travels where we cannot. Above her, the sky has become intensely clear. Sunlight rests upon the city walls, upon canals, rooftops, doorways, and tools waiting to be lifted. The living world shines with almost careless abundance. Its beauty has not increased. Only the wound in the household has made everyone notice it. The last earth is pressed smooth. The departed has not selected reward over punishment. No shining verdict has separated virtue from failure. The deeper decision lies hidden within the ritual itself. The person is entrusted to the realm below, and the living accept that love must change its shape. One side releases the voice it wishes to hear. The other releases the doorway it cannot enter. You stand beside the sealed ground as the mourners begin withdrawing, each carrying a silence no one else can fully share. Behind them remains a name, a grave, and a few carefully chosen objects beneath the soil. The cup is still. The seal no longer speaks for property, and the soul, whatever it may be, faces the quietest demand of all to let the world remain beautiful without returning to claim it. The earth changes color beneath the archaeologist's trowel, becoming slightly darker, slightly softer, slightly more deliberate. You kneel at the edge of a grave cut into the ancient soil of where sunlight pours down with a brightness almost too harsh for the quiet work taking place. Brushes move gently. Loose dust is lifted away. Then, from the brown ground, something catches the light. A bead appears. It is no larger than a fingernail, blue against the soil, polished by hands that vanished more than 4,000 years ago. Soon another emerges, then another, until a scattered line begins revealing the vanished curve of a necklace. The body beside it has lost almost every familiar feature. Bone remains where expression, voice, perfume, and warmth once lived. Yet the necklace still remembers how it lay against a human throat. You lean closer. To uncover a grave is to meet someone through what others refuse to discard. A skeleton tells you that a life ended. Objects reveal that the ending mattered. A pin once gathered clothing at a shoulder. A shell held dark cosmetic powder near an eye. A bracelet circled a wrist during meals, arguments, work, and sleep. These objects are not impressive merely because they are old. They are moving because they were once ordinary to someone. The cemetery at yielded nearly 2,000 graves during excavations directed by Leonard Woolley for the Penn Museum and the British Museum. Most were not chambers of kings or queens. They were simple pits, often holding bodies wrapped in reed matting or laid within clay coffins. Around many of them rested vessels, ornaments, tools, weapons, and personal belongings. Modest arrangements surrounding people whose names are no longer known records confirm something both humble and profound. The dead were often dressed not as discarded remains, but as people still carrying identity. Even where gold was absent, a few beads or a simple pin could preserve a final outline of dignity. A family without palace wealth could still declare, through one carefully placed object, that this body had been recognized and tended. Near the skull of one buried woman, a cluster of ornaments slowly emerges. Their arrangement suggests hair once pinned and decorated with care. You imagine someone preparing her for burial, smoothing strands that would soon vanish, fastening jewelry whose beauty could no longer be admired by the wearer. Was this done because she required beauty in the lower country? Was it done because the mourners could not endure seeing her reduced to illness and death? Perhaps the two wishes were never separated. Love often speaks through arrangement. In a richer burial, the colors deepen. Lapis stones carry the blue of a night sky without clouds. Carnelian beads glow with the warmth of banked embers. Gold lies thin and bright against the dirt. Astonishing in a land where the metal had to arrive through distant exchange routes. Such materials traveled enormous distances to reach the graves of mountains, merchants, river journeys, guarded caravans, bargaining, risk, and royal demand all ended here, against the stillness of a buried body. A famous woman named Puabi descended adorned with elaborate jewelry, including a magnificent headdress of gold, lapis, and carnelian. Her ornaments speak unmistakably of rank and ceremonial splendor, yet they also raise a quieter question. Were these treasures meant to equip her identity in death, or to persuade the living that power remained intact even as her body disappeared beneath earth? The grave does not answer. Beside certain bodies lie cups and jars. But you have already sensed that such vessels carry nourishment and care. Now another possibility presents itself. Some objects may not have been gifts for use at all. They may have completed a picture. A person surrounded by familiar belongings remained socially understandable. The grave became a final room, arranged with enough signs of life that grief could recognize the departed inside it. Here lies a gaming board fragment, perhaps suggesting leisure, companionship, or status. There rests a weapon near a male burial, not proof of battle, but a statement about how others wished him remembered. A copper tool appears where a working life may have left its strongest mark. Objects do not merely accompany the dead, they make claims about them. Claims placed into soil by survivors. The oddest discoveries resist easy explanation. A small model boat in a grave may evoke travel through marsh and canal, ordinary movement in a river-shaped world. Yet placed beside the dead, it can seem to suggest another voyage, a quiet passage requiring assistance beyond the shoreline of breath. Archaeologists must remain cautious. A model boat is not automatically a vessel for a soul. It may be a possession, a symbol of livelihood, or a beloved miniature offered for reasons no excavation can recover. Still, its presence troubles the imagination. The dead person lies unmoving, while the little craft seems ready to leave. There are amulets as well, small shapes worn or deposited near bodies. Objects whose meanings may have blended beauty, protection, status, and devotion. A living person wears protection because illness, misfortune, and envy threaten the fragile body. Why would such an item accompany the dead, unless the lower world also seemed capable of danger? Perhaps death was not regarded as perfect safety. Perhaps entering the earth required defenses of another kind. A museum label can describe material, date, measurement, and location. It cannot measure fear. One peculiar custom remains especially difficult to face calmly. In a small number of splendid royal graves, attendants were buried alongside elite figures in carefully arranged groups, some wearing ornament and appearing connected with music, ceremony, or feasting. Musical instruments were discovered among them, including lyres decorated with extraordinary artistry. The arrangement suggests a final performance of status, a courtly world carried into burial with terrible completeness. Earlier excavators imagined attendants peacefully drinking a fatal cup. Later examinations of selected remains suggested a more forceful death for at least some individuals. The exact ritual sequence continues to be disputed by specialists. What remains certain is that royal death could draw other lives into its solemn display, making the tomb not merely a resting place, but a staged vision of power preserved underground. You picture the lyre in the dim chamber. Its strings are silent now. Its decorated face looks outward with enormous eyes fashioned by human skill. Music once filled courtyards, banquets, ceremonies, and nights heavy with incense. Music accompanied celebration because a city wished to feel alive together. To place an instrument beside the dead suggests that silence itself felt incomplete, almost indecent, unless some trace of sound descended with them. There is gentle absurdity in arranging entertainment for a kingdom described as dusty and joyless. Then the humor catches in your throat. These were not theatrical props alone. These were objects held by real hands, placed beside real bodies, in ceremonies whose grief and authority may have been inseparable. Researchers from major museums and universities still ask what grave goods truly meant to the people who placed them. Did they furnish continued existence? Did they display family standing? Did they protect the living from unsettled spirits? Did they honor the dead through the only language material culture could offer? The answer may differ from grave to grave, household to household, and century to century. The brush moves again. A final object is uncovered beside a quiet pair of bones. It is a simple bead, plain enough to escape the admiration granted to gold. Someone chose it. Someone placed it close. Perhaps it had rested against skin during a life no poem considered worthy of preservation. Now it is the surviving witness, around you. The ancient cemetery stretches beneath sunlight, crowded with vanished people and stubborn little things, pins, shells, tools, amulets, ornaments, objects that refuse to explain themselves entirely, yet reveal that death was never met with emptiness alone. The living placed beauty near the bones, and perhaps, beneath that beauty, they placed their fear. In a quiet reading room, far from the heat of southern Iraq, a scholar lowers a clay tablet beneath a patient lamp. The room smells of paper, dust, and old wooden shelves, not river mud or grave soil. Outside, traffic passes through a modern city, tires hissing gently on rain-darkened streets. Inside, the scholar studies marks pressed by a reed into clay more than 4,000 years ago. Some signs are clear. Others have broken away entirely. A missing corner can remove a name. A crack can divide an action from its reason. A damaged line can leave a goddess entering darkness without telling you precisely why she chose the journey. The surviving words invite attention, but they also demand restraint. Every tablet arrives carrying both a message and a silence. You stand behind the reader's shoulder, watching a pencil move slowly across a notebook. A sign is copied, checked, reconsidered, then placed beside several possible meanings. There is no thunder of revelation. There is only the modest discipline of doubt. It is strangely beautiful, this careful refusal to pretend that broken evidence speaks more clearly than it does. The writings called Sumerian were recovered in fragments from ancient cities, including Nippur, Ur, and other sites buried beneath centuries of earth. Many were not found as complete works resting politely upon shelves. They were scattered pieces, school copies, duplicate passages, and damaged tablets whose lines must be compared across collections. Scholars reconstruct poems as one might rebuild a shattered bowl, knowing some portions will always remain absent. At Oxford, the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature gathered translations and transliterations of major compositions, including the descent of Inanna and the death traditions surrounding Gilgamesh. Its work allows modern readers to enter a literature once locked within specialist archives. Yet even a beautifully presented translation cannot remove every uncertainty. A translated line is a doorway, not the entire house. A scholar pauses over the word for the great realm below. Does it describe a physical underworld, a cosmic region, a poetic boundary, or several meanings held together at once? Ancient writing is not always interested in choosing one interpretation. A word may carry mountain, foreign land, grave depth, danger, and sacred distance inside the same small cluster of signs. Your eyes grow accustomed to the tablet's surface. It is uneven, thumb-marked, slightly warped from drying. This is not an abstract message descending from heaven. Someone made it. Someone shaped clay, prepared a reed, and copied lines known from a living tradition. Perhaps a young scribe struggled with the signs while a teacher sighed nearby. Even terrifying underworld poetry may once have involved homework. The thought is oddly comforting. Then the questions return. Did ordinary Sumerians truly believe that the dead walked through gates under divine supervision? Did they imagine judges, dust, and a queen below as literal features of existence? Or were these images shaped mainly for sacred performances, temple audiences, and the education of scribes? A myth may preserve sincere belief, but it may also deepen that belief through poetry, ceremony, and deliberate mystery. There is no single ancient Sumerian voice available to answer. A temple official living near a grand sanctuary may have understood death through ritual duty and divine order. A mother placing a cup beside a buried child may have cared little for formal theology. A king planning his monuments may have worried about status continuing below. A field worker facing an unmarked grave may simply have feared thirst, neglect, and the loss of a spoken name. Belief is rarely tidy, even among the living. At the University of Chicago, specialists studying Mesopotamian death have drawn attention to the social anxiety revealed by stories of bodies denied proper treatment. To leave a corpse without burial was not merely untidy or disrespectful. It disturbed the expected passage from living person to properly situated dead. The texts repeatedly suggest that the fate of the body mattered because disorder in death threatened memory, family, and the fragile boundary of the community. Yet another reader may approach the same material differently. The underworld poem can be read as a meditation on political power, in which even the most exalted figure must submit to rules beyond personal desire. Inanna enters magnificently equipped and emerges only through a costly exchange. Her descent may speak about death, but it may also speak about authority, ambition, and the danger of reaching into a realm that is not yours to govern. Perhaps the poem performs both tasks. An ancient story does not need to remain inside one modern folder. You move through a museum gallery where objects from Mesopotamian graves sit beneath glass. Their labels are calm and efficient. Date, material, site, excavation number. A gold leaf glimmers beside a row of blue stones. A battered vessel rests beneath directed light. Nearby, visitors lean closer, speaking softly, as people often do around objects connected with the dead. One visitor reads a label and imagines a queen surrounded by treasure in the next world. Another sees a display of royal control, a final performance imposed upon mourners and attendants. A child sees only gold and wonders why it has become so dull. Each response touches something real, yet none can recover the entire ancient ceremony. The grave is evidence, but it is not a confession. A charmingly peculiar theory sometimes appears in popular retellings, claiming that Sumerian underworld stories preserve a precise map of spiritual transformation, with every gate matching a hidden stage of the human soul. The idea is elegant, wonderfully organized, and suspiciously convenient. Ancient literature often attracts modern minds eager to discover a complete secret system inside incomplete tablets. The old scribes might be amused to learn how efficiently later ages finish their thoughts for them. Still, such speculation reveals a genuine longing. People wish the fragments to contain more than poetry. They wish there were instructions hidden among the broken lines, a sequence explaining where consciousness travels, what it encounters, and how it might pass safely through the darkness. The desire is understandable. A damaged tablet feels easier to trust than an unanswered night. A curator opens a storage drawer, and rows of tablet fragments lie inside padded compartments. Some are tiny enough to fit within your palm. On one shard, only a few signs remain. Perhaps they once formed part of a lament. Perhaps they listed rations or deliveries, because not every ancient mark contains a cosmic secret. Much of civilization is accounting, even when discovered beside myths. The distinction matters. Modern scholarship protects the ancient world from becoming a mirror for every present fear. Researchers compare vocabulary, tablet copies, archaeological contexts, burial arrangements, and later Mesopotamian traditions. They examine where a text was found, when it was copied, and whether its images appear elsewhere. Their caution does not make the mystery smaller. It prevents a fragile mystery from being replaced by an attractive invention. Debate remains open because the evidence deserves honesty. Some historians understand the lower country as a genuine religious expectation shared across Mesopotamian society. Others emphasize literary art, warning that myths about divine journeys cannot simply describe every person's burial belief. Still others explore ritual experience, suggesting that poetry, offerings, lamentation, and household memory join together, allowing the living to feel that death had an order even when its nature remained unseen. You listen to these voices without needing one to silence all others. The tablet beneath the lamp contains no modern certainty. Its surface is cracked, its lines severe, its world distant from your own. Yet it has crossed thousands of years because someone believed the words deserved to be pressed into clay. Someone copied a story in which brightness approached darkness and discovered a law stronger than adornment, power, or desire. Perhaps that ancient reader believed every image. Perhaps the reader understood the poem as sacred metaphor. Perhaps those differences were never as important then as they seem now. The scholar finally lifts her eyes from the tablet. Night has gathered against the windows, reflecting the lamp and her tired face. The clay remains quiet on its support, withholding the answer that modern curiosity most wishes to hear. Not because it has nothing to say, because the oldest truths may survive only as questions held carefully in the dark. Night has settled over the reed marshes, turning the water into long strips of darkness. A narrow boat moves without hurry between tall stems, guided by a single pole pressing gently into the mud below. You sit near its center, listening to the small drip of water from the lifted wood. No city wall rises nearby. No household lamp offers direction. Only the marsh breathes around you. Hidden birds shifting among reeds that whisper against one another. The boatman says nothing. You're not certain when you entered the craft. Perhaps you stepped aboard from a riverbank softened by moonlight. Perhaps you simply became aware of movement, as happens in dreams, when the journey begins before the mind has named it. The air smells of wet clay, fish scales, and distant smoke. Your fingers rest against the woven rim, feeling each rough strand beneath your skin. Then you notice your hands becoming lighter, not transparent, not vanishing, simply less concerned with holding anything. The woven edge slips beneath your fingertips, and you feel no need to grasp it again. That small release seems almost insignificant. Yet the marsh grows quieter around it, as though darkness has been listening for the moment when your body stops insisting upon control. Ahead, a low bank appears. The boat touches mud with a soft sound, and you step onto firm ground. Your sandals make no mark that you can see. A path begins between low mounds of earth, winding away from the water into a country without planted fields. You know instinctively that no market waits at its end, no shaded courtyard, no roof where sleeping relatives breathe beneath woven blankets. Your name still belongs to you. For now, that is enough. Across ancient Mesopotamia, names carried more than convenience. A name could be written upon a seal, pressed into clay, spoken during an offering, or preserved in a dedication. Museums holding votive figures from early Mesopotamian temples reveal worshippers carved with clasped hands and enormous attentive eyes, standing permanently before divine presence. These small figures suggest a world where being seen and remembered held sacred force. You walk slowly, carrying your name like a small, warm object. Yet the path offers no one to receive it. The ground beneath you is pale and powdery. Dust rises at each step, coating your feet, then settling without breeze. Overhead, there are no stars, only a dim ceiling of shadow that presses the landscape into silence. The world of warmth feels distant now, not violently taken, merely beyond reach. A voice begins somewhere unseen. It is a lament, low and steady, sung by someone whose face you cannot find. In the cities of Mesopotamia, mourning could be shaped into formal speech and music, entrusted to trained lamenters who gave grief a voice when families had exhausted their own. Their songs addressed ruined cities, angry gods, vanished rulers, and beloved dead. Sorrow was not hidden away. It was allowed rhythm, repetition, and breath. The voice follows you. It does not describe your death. It describes absence, an empty sleeping place, a cup not lifted, a doorway crossed by everyone except the one expected most. Each image enters quietly, without accusation. You understand that the song is not pulling you toward life. It is allowing life to say what losing you has meant. Your chest tightens, though you no longer know whether you breathe. There are faces you wish to see again. Someone laughing while flour dusted both wrists. Someone asleep beneath a thin covering during a hot night. Someone irritated by a broken pot, then laughing despite themselves. Such memories arrive without order, not as a grand review, but as scattered lights on a river, beautiful because they cannot be gathered. You turn, expecting the path behind you to lead back toward those lights. There is only dust. The sadness is deep, but not sharp. It feels older than panic, Every creature that loves the world must eventually discover that love does not grant ownership of it. You may cherish the sound of a familiar voice. You may carry the scent of bread, wool, rain, and warm skin within memory. Yet you cannot force the living world to become your dwelling once more. Perhaps this is surrender, not obedience forced by a threatening hand, not a verdict recited by stern officials, not even a brave decision made with clear understanding. It is the slow recognition that what has been loved remains worthy, even when it can no longer be entered. The house stays beautiful. The river stays bright. The beloved face stays beloved. You simply cannot possess them through longing. A small figure appears beside the path. At first you think it is a child. Then the outline seems older, stooped, wrapped in a garment roughened by dust. The figure holds something close to its chest. Perhaps a bowl. Perhaps nothing more than cupped hands. It does not look at you. It waits with the patient stillness of someone accustomed to being unnoticed. You wonder whether anyone speaks its name. The thought troubles you more than darkness. To be dead may be frightening, but to be no longer called seems colder still. Somewhere above, families preserve absences through gestures repeated until children inherit them. Somewhere else, a name ends because no mouth remembers its sound. A life that once filled a room can narrow into silence so complete that even grief disappears. Later, Mesopotamian ritual writings contain unusual attempts to seek messages from the dead, including rites for consulting a ghost in moments of uncertainty. Such texts belong to a complex magical and religious world, not a simple portrait of ordinary family practice. Still, their existence reveals an enduring ache. The living did not merely fear the unseen. Sometimes they wanted desperately to ask it questions. Are you at peace? Do you remember us? Did we do enough? The small figure finally lifts its head, but its features remain indistinct. Perhaps it is no particular person. Perhaps it is the shape taken by everyone who has waited to be remembered. You feel an urge to speak, to give it some word of kindness, but your own name has begun to loosen. It is still present, yet no longer fixed against your mind with the same force. A strange sensation follows. Losing the name does not feel like punishment. It feels like setting down a jar carried for a great distance. You have needed it. You have answered to it. It has gathered affection, duty, embarrassment, praise, and grief across a lifetime. Yet now, the path asks whether you are only the sound others use to summon you. Researchers still dispute how closely ancient underworld poetry reflects personal religious expectation. Some hear a shared belief in a destination awaiting the dead. Others hear ritual language, literary imagination, or social fear transformed into story. Perhaps the uncertainty itself is honest. Death has always attracted images because certainty refuses to return from it. The lament grows quieter. You continue walking, no longer counting steps. Behind you are the reed marshes, the boat, the imagined shoreline, and every warm object once held in a living hand. Ahead lies no clear answer, only a depth of silence gentle enough to enter, vast enough to hold countless forgotten names. You do not feel brave. You do not feel defeated. You feel the last resistance softening, like clay touched by water, like a closed hand easing open in sleep. Somewhere beyond hearing, the living continue with their tender, difficult tasks. They pour water, they speak, they forget, then remember again, and you travel onward, not because the darkness has explained itself, but because nothing loved is honored by refusing to let it remain alive without you. A pale morning gathers above the excavated ruins. where low walls emerge from the earth like the outlines of forgotten rooms. The wind moves lightly across broken brick, lifting grains of dust and carrying them through empty doorways. No voices remain in these streets. No family bends over grain. No official seals wet clay. No mourner pours water into waiting soil. Yet something has remained. You walk beside a shallow trench where a small tablet fragment rests upon a padded tray. It appears unimpressive at first glance. A brown piece of clay marked by scratches too orderly to be accidental. Its surface has survived collapsed buildings, changing rivers, forgotten kingdoms, and the long patience of buried silence. Somewhere upon such fragments, the ancient dead still move through gates, receive offerings, or answer the sorrowful questions of the living. The clay cannot tell you everything. That may be why it feels so honest. The writings preserved by the Oxford Collection of Sumerian Literature show that the world below was imagined through repeated images of gates, dust, divine authority, lost comfort, and the dependence of the dead upon remembrance. These writings do not present one neat teaching, carefully arranged for a modern reader. They offer scenes, voices, rituals, and broken possibilities, leaving the darkness partly undisturbed. You stand very still beside the tablet. Its marks do not prove what consciousness encounters when the body falls silent. They do not describe measured minutes following death. They do not promise that a departing soul sees 7 doors, 7 lights, or 7 choices arranged like stepping stones. Such claims belong to later imagination, drawn toward ancient clay because ancient clay seems capable of guarding secrets. The real fragments are quieter. They reveal people who feared that death might involve separation from warmth, food, touch, status, and familiar voices. They reveal people who cared whether a body was buried properly, whether a name endured, whether a cup reached the thirsty dead. They reveal that the oldest surviving questions about loss are not so distant from those whispered beside a modern bed. Where has the loved one gone? Can anything still be given? Will they know they were loved? The wind brushes your face with fine dust. Beyond the ruins, the flat land stretches beneath an enormous sky, brightening into gold as sunlight touches the earth. Somewhere nearby, a shepherd urges animals forward. Somewhere farther away, water still enters fields through channels maintained by patient hands. Life proceeds across the same plain where generations once carried their dead into silence. The ordinary world is almost unbearably beautiful. At the edge of the trench stands a conservator, studying the tablet beneath a protective shade. She does not claim to hear the voice of a ghost trapped within it. She examines signs, joins fragments, compares copies, and allows uncertainty to remain where lines have broken. This patient method may seem less romantic than announcing a hidden message from the first civilization, yet it offers something more respectful. It allows the dead to keep their own mystery. A strange rumor has sometimes wandered through popular accounts of ancient Mesopotamia, suggesting that forbidden tablets once recorded secret routes by which chosen souls escaped death entirely. No accepted Sumerian composition confirms such a hidden manual. The rumor persists because people prefer a sealed chamber containing answers to an open sky containing silence. There is comfort in imagining that certainty exists somewhere, even when nobody can produce it. Still, the absence of a manual does not empty the ancient stories of meaning. A gate does not need to be physically found beneath the sand to describe an experience the human heart recognizes. Every bereavement contains a threshold. On one side, a person is reachable, demanding, amusing, imperfect, warm. On the other, The same person becomes memory, object, name, dream, and absence. Those who remain behind stand helplessly near the crossing, offering whatever their age teaches them to offer. A cup of water, a flower, a spoken name in an empty room. You walk away from the trench and enter the shadow of a damaged wall. Its bricks are rough beneath your fingertips, many bearing the faint marks of the hands that shaped them. The ancient builders did not know which parts of their city would survive. They could not foresee museums, scholarly editions, glass cases, or listeners lying awake in distant countries while their stories drift softly through the dark. They built because their world required building. They mourned because their hearts required mourning. That simplicity feels almost sacred. Researchers continue to disagree about the final meaning of the underworld texts. Some understand them as reflections of widely shared belief, giving poetic shape to the expected destiny of the dead. Some place greater emphasis upon temple tradition, royal ideology, or stories copied within scribal education. Others suggest that ritual practice and poetic imagination cannot be separated cleanly, because grief often uses story to make an invisible loss bearable. None of these readings closes the gate entirely. Perhaps the lower world was understood literally by those who placed vessels near the buried. Perhaps its dust and judges were sacred images for a separation no language could describe directly. Perhaps ordinary families moved between belief, fear, habit, and love without demanding that each gesture explain the universe. You may recognize that condition. Even now, people stand beside graves and speak to those who cannot visibly answer. They preserve a coat because it still carries a familiar shape. They prepare a favorite meal on an anniversary. They wake from dreams with a name upon their lips and feel. Briefly, that distance has grown thin. Education does not remove these impulses. Time does not make them foolish. Love is older than proof. The light rises higher, filling the ruined streets and softening their shadows. A lizard darts across warm brick, stops, then vanishes through a crack where a roof beam once rested. The city no longer lives as its inhabitants knew it, yet neither has it disappeared. Its clay speaks in fragments. Its graves preserve gestures. Its poems allow questions to travel beyond the voices that first shaped them. You consider the soul within those stories, standing before the final darkness without ornaments, tools, titles, or certainty. Perhaps the choice was never between two destinations. Perhaps it was the quieter choice present in every loss, whether made by the departing or by those who remain. To hold tightly to what cannot remain, or to let love change into remembrance. No tablet confirms this. No tablet entirely denies it. The wind lifts again, carrying dust across the ancient ground in soft, wandering lines. For an instant, the marks resemble writing, then scatter before they can be read. You understand why these stories survive. They do not defeat death. They do not map it. They sit beside the question, as quietly as a family beside a cooling body, refusing to abandon what cannot be explained. The gate stands somewhere beyond language. It may open into nothing more than the sleep of earth. It may open into a country once imagined through dust, shadow, and watchful powers. It may open into a mystery for which every human story is only a lamp placed carefully beside the threshold. The tablet rests beneath the morning light. Its last broken line remains unreadable, and perhaps the story is not yet complete. Wind down. The wind quiets now, and the ancient plain softens beneath a gentle evening that seems to arrive without urgency. The ruined walls become low shapes in fading light, no longer severe, no longer asking anything of you. Dust settles upon brick, upon stone, upon the narrow places where human hands once pressed their hopes into clay. You do not need to solve the silence tonight. The people who lived beside those rivers could not solve it either. They had their lamps, their bread, their water, their songs, and the names they spoke with care. They lived within the same tender uncertainty that still accompanies every human heart. They loved people they could not keep. They feared distances they could not cross. They offered comfort into darkness, because offering comfort was itself a form of peace. Now the river grows faint in your hearing. Reeds stir softly at the bank. Then rest. A final lamp glows in a courtyard where no sorrow needs your attention. Its flame is small, steady, and warm. Nearby, a cup waits beneath the stars, filled with clear water and touched by silver moonlight. Nothing approaches you. Nothing calls you away. You're simply resting near an old story, allowing its shadows to drift gently past without entering your own room. The gates remain far away, quiet within the world of ancient clay. The dust remains upon the tablets. The unanswered words remain safely in the keeping of time. Your breathing is slow. Your hands are warm. The night around you is kind. And as the rivers of Sumer fade into darkness, carrying their whispered names toward the sea, you may let every question grow lighter, every image become softer, and every ancient doorway close gently into sleep.